Welcome to another episode of Moral Injury International. I'm Marty here in Melbourne, and I'm going to pass over this show. We have a special show and a very special guest, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague, friend, and co-host, Leo Quinlan in Ireland. Leo, over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Marty. Today, we are privileged to have what I'd like to consider a good friend of mine and a good friend of the Quinlan family, Tom Gunn from Mullingar. Tom was a private soldier in Jadotville back in 1961. Later, he was a corporal. I think, Tom, you were a corporal when you retired from the army. And I don't know too much about when you retired or anything. You might like to tell us anyway. So just for the viewers that might be watching this for the first time, just a very, very brief. Jadotville action took place in September 1961 in Katanga in the Congo. I won't go into the history of the Congo. People should know it at this stage. But in any event, a company that Tom belonged to was attacked in the morning of the 13th of September. The fighting went on until the Sunday. It's well known what's happened. They made a movie of it called The Siege of Jadotville. It's on Netflix, etc., etc., etc. And after 5 days of action, Tom, like the others, ended up as a prisoner of war for 5 weeks. And the link that we have between the three of us here is that Marty and I are the sons of Jadotville veterans. Tom is a Jadotville veteran. And Marty's father, Corporal Tom O'Connor, was in one of the armored cars, Tom, that was giving mobile reserve for you. Just for the listeners, also, you were part of number 3 platoon, commanded by Lieutenant Noel Carey. You were actually in platoon headquarters. Yourself, Lieutenant Noel Carey, Sergeant McLaughlin, and Signaller Myler. I just checked all that just before I came online here with you. Yes. And that's right. Can you remember all that, Tom?
Of course I can, Leo, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now,
Myler died about 2 months ago. Yeah.
I see. Oh, wow. Okay. Okay, so look, Tom, we're talking today about moral injury. And this came about a few years ago when I had some interaction with the U.S. Army War College and Veterans Association, and they mentioned the word moral injury to me, and they explained what it was. And they said that Jadotville is the perfect example of collective moral injury. It's the only example they could think of.
Yes.
In other words, where everybody suffered the same thing at the same time. So for viewers and listeners who, for the first time, might be hearing about it, very, very briefly, in layman terms, moral injury is where soldiers have suffered some traumatic experience and are later betrayed by higher authority. And I've always said, this is Jadotville. Yeah. Betrayed when you came home, no duty of care, etc. And the side effects of moral injury, which is it's kind of like post-traumatic stress, but not exactly the same. Moral injury is more of an injury to the soul. Yeah, you end up doing some things that were against the way you were brought up, the way your religious upbringing, the family upbringing, killing people when you didn't have to kill them, and so on and so forth. But the side effects of moral injury is people go silent. They don't talk about it. My own dad was in the same situation. He never spoke. He spoke to me about the action, the tactics, the strategy, etc., but never told me the downside of what he was suffering in himself and how he thought. You know, you have silence, you have lack of personal relationships, broken marriages, can't hold down a job, depression, anxiety, mental illness, unfortunately, in some cases, suicide. Okay, so that's like for our listeners and people viewing this in the future, that's the layman's way of explaining moral injury. So I'd like to kind of throw it over to you now, Tom, and for you to tell us whatever it is you want to tell us about Jadotville. You don't have to go into the gory details if you don't want to, but tell us something. And then afterwards, the after effects, coming home. I know you had certain things about somebody met you on the square and said some things, and in pubs some things, and so on. So I'd like to hear from you. So I'm throwing the floor over to you, and Marty and I will jump in every now and again if we need to.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
the floor is yours.
And Tom, welcome to the show, and it's a pleasure to meet you and an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, Marty. My name is Thomas Patrick Joseph Gunn. from Tipperary, by the way. I joined the army in Clonmel in 1953. I was going on to a big Christian brother, so I left and I joined the army. And I had great, I won't say asparagus, I said aspirations. And I did my training. I was top shot and all that. And I went to Galway to learn Irish. You could be transferred to any corps you wanted to. And I like Galway, in fact. It suited me better than the people of Galway are more open, and I was good with the Gaelic. And then I wanted a promotion, so I went on a military policeman's course, which I passed. And I was only 17, and the police corps didn't suit me because you need to be older, and you know they're just. So I applied for demotion to get away from the police end of it, and I went to the 6th Battalion, and I liked that woman as well, and there was some great NCOs and officers there. They were infantry, but we had other corps as well there, and I was command sniper. I was fairly good. My name Gunn means not just a face. And I went to because I got a transfer course in Mullingar, so off I went in September, and I passed the course, obviously, and I said, I was given the option to stay in Mullingar, and I met Teresa there, you know, the two were young and foolish, and we got married, and we're married ever since. 65 years ago, yeah.
Oh,
wow.
You get less for murder, Tom.
Yeah. That was a life sentence. You took the words on me.
That's right. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
And then the Congo came up. Oh, it was great excitement, and Teresa was expecting this, so we were all brought into a big room in Columbarris, and anyone volunteering. I was the only one that didn't volunteer because she was expecting. So I felt it my duty with her first child. It was a big decision to make because everybody wants to go to the white man's grave, the Congo, and these places and see the world. You know? So next year, I volunteered again, and I was sent off with the 35th Battalion. And we trained in Athlone it's a type of guerrilla warfare, jungle warfare. People, I don't know how on the rifle range we trained, you see. And there wasn't a tree for 600 yards away. This is supposed to be fellas in trees firing barrels at you. So we trained basic stuff, you know, made ambushes and that sort. And we were the first to be given the automatic rifle, the FM. We had to train on that. And I felt the FN, and it was like handling a plough compared with the lovely Enfields. They had a great feel of them. And it was a big old killer of a thing. So off we went to the Congo, marched through Athlone, Leo's father leading us, and the pipe band went across the bridge in Athlone. And there's always a bit of fun, you see. The drummer was a bit of a show-off, and he was baiting this big drum. And a gust of wind came up. There's a rail there, and it keels over his head, you see. And he was trying to bait the drum and cover wherever he had to go. You wouldn't believe it if you saw it. So off we went to tears, flag rolling, flag waving and tears, you know the song. And often the chorus down to it was Beltranwell that time, you see. And we were the last to leave it on the big Globus because the Merc said it was too bumpy for takeoff. You know, the ants, the smooth one. And off we went into this big thing. We were all sitting side by side with our backs to the windows, and fellas rows and rows and armored cars there off over the Sahara Desert. It wasn't massive ideal if you were a tourist, because then if you were 13,000 miles, you could view everything. We landed in Nigeria, in Kano. It's on the verge of the Sahara Desert, and we got out in our bull's wool uniforms, 90 degrees of heat. And we stuck it, and we used to stand under the wings of the plane when we were on the runway. Off down then to next stop was Leopoldville. And it was a mysterious place. It had the atmosphere of Africa, you know. And there was an awful lot of other Nigerians, Somalians, you know, African nations that were part of the empire that my father and your father and grandfather took the foundations out from. And they used to always shake our hands, the Nigerians. All the old empire people don't. But it was a great feeling that they'd come up when you were Irish, and more or less very welcome. You know, it was a proud moment. Swedes and all them were left over there on their own to drink tea and take photographs. They were good at that. And off to Elizabethville, over jungle, and touched down on this thing, and it trundled down the runway and bounced out to our camp. And we were in it was the disused shoe stocking factory, but they made stockings, and it was horrible. It was kind of run down, and the roof was gone. And we slept on the raw, on a blanket or something, and your helmet as a pillow. And we had no mosquito nets. Imagine they left us out. It was terrible. You lay down and you fought them off all night, and you'd know which side a fella, what side he slept on when they seen him the next morning when he stood up. If it was right-hand side, we say it was puffed, he slept on his left-hand side, because the mosquitoes couldn't get at it, and they had a field day doing jigs and reeds and jigs on his face, the other side. Oh, you were on the right side, Les. And then we went out to Elizabethville Airport, was about 3 miles away. We went out with a nice accommodation. There were Sabina villas, which were the Sabina was the Belgian air thing. And all the pilots and the Mauler live in these villas down there. And a lot of them had fled, so they gave us into this lovely, you can imagine Sabina. It was like the Waldorf Astoria to us, you know. And they had a thing in the toilet, nobody could figure out what it was. It was like a toilet, an army toilet, which had an open top and two little bidet. Some others said, how do you eat them? You know? But this is luxury, though.
But Tom, if I can jump in here, you know, I have a feeling that we could listen to you for 5 or 6 hours, but we've only got about 1 hour.
He's giving me the biggest laugh there. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, I know. So Tom, can I just for the record say that the Irish were never in any kind of action at this stage. The first action was Operation Rum Punch, which we don't have to talk about. It ended. Go ahead, Tom.
Rum Punch is where we got all the mercenaries and sent them off.
Correct.
But not at 11 o'clock in the morning. They're back at 4 that evening.
That's right. All right. That's a story in itself. But look, you ended up going to Jadotville. You ended up going to Jadotville around the 2nd and 3rd of September. So tell us, after you arrived in Jadotville, what the feeling was like.
The Belgians in Jadotville were getting a bit touchy, and things weren't looking well. And there was 2 companies there, a Swedish company and B company, an Irish company.
Yes.
So for some reason, the Belgian, whatever his name, commissar, he said, he said, one company will do us. And this is a military, against all military things. They withdrew B Company and the Swedish company to Elizabethville and brought us up the whole way to Jadotville. From an operational point of view, imagine, why not leave the Swedish company and B Company? Not leave one of them.
Yeah, Tom, can I jump in? This is historical fact, and actually it's an important point you've made. They withdrew two companies. Actually, the two companies withdrew. They withdrew the two companies because it was too dangerous there, and yet to send out one company. That's a tactical error, a strategic error, etc., which leads into how you were attacked and how you suffered, and so on and so forth. So, can we jump, because of time factor, Tom? Can we jump into, okay, you were attacked on the morning of the 13th, Wednesday the 13th, and I remember you and I, before we ever met, we were interviewed on the same radio program. I forget, Morning Ireland or something, some years ago. And I remember you and I saying hello over the radio. And then you said that the first hour was kind of unusual, terrifying, etc. But then after that, you settled down. So can you take it from there?
First up, I didn't get up to go to Mass, but I heard a burst of machine gun in the morning. What said something letting off a round or two. And the next thing I had the reply. So then John Monaghan got on the Vickers up there and he held them. And we all we had our trenches built, or dug, and our positions and our fields of fire and everything. And I was an into it. The trench ran, didn't bother looking for my boats, by the way. And reconnoiter and where are they? Most of the firing was over here. And there was an awful interchange of fire and pandemonium, more or less. Not pandemonium, but it died off around 11. And the chaplain went around and given conditional absolution. We used to call it artificial absolution. And he asked me about my wife and all that. And I said, just said to him, the father, when you said something, you said, remember my wife and your. So off he went. And there was a lull then until maybe around 11:30 when they attacked en masse, more or less. It was up in the brain and the Downley, but great soldier was beside me. He used to supply me ammunition. And we could see they were coming down to the left. Where you picked them and you fired. You didn't fire long bursts with a machine gun. And perhaps you're thinking, if I did that, I'll be out before 3 o'clock. But it's 2 round above, and maybe you can snipe with the brain, you see. If you saw a fellow get 500 yards, that was a good shot. But if they came too close, you'd have to fire bursts, you see. Well, we beat them off around 2:30, and then the officers and the sergeant around, and the usual, how are you doing? Have you fun? And then we settled down for the night,
Okay, so Tom, that went on for a number of days. And there's a famous photograph of you with the group standing in front of the helicopter. You, the good-looking fellow, tall, good-looking young man in front of the helicopter,
I was the man of the day, film star, voting.
Okay, Tom, can we get on to the effects of Jadotville and captivity that might have had on you, and then about when you came home? So do you want to say something about the effects of captivity first, and then on the way home, what was it like?
We were taken prisoner and they brought us into a disused hotel for the colonial type, It wasn't a luxury place, Hotel de l'Europe. And we're given, the privates slept on the floor of the bar. The sergeants were on the upper, halfway up, and the officers had waitresses and sandwiches and radio. But we all smelt after a week and off of the socks. And there was 5 Italian taken around the same time, and they were brought in, Italians. And
That's right.
You know what disgusted them? The smell of our feet. And they couldn't stick it. And they got rid of the Italians, sent them back to where they...
Yeah, but there you were 5 days in trenches. No wonder you smelled.
Captivity, to alleviate the boredom, we got people, maybe you were a fisherman and you were good, and they would get 5 or 6 around and they would tell us the type of fly, and another fellow would be good, and he'd to alleviate the boredom and to be occupied, you know. So we'd sit around and and there was that's the one where different people would of interest, and we'd do that. And then in the afternoon, it was well air conditioned. That I was sleeping behind the bar, lovely, and it wasn't nice. We see all those optics and things, and nothing you could do about it. So that went on, and we got rations. A truck would come every day with rations, and we were well fed under the second. We got nice beef for the dinner, and we'd have the usual good stuff, yeah. And at night, then we'd get together and have a chat, and we'd rise and we'd sing song, and we would try to get away from the sentimental end of things, you know, because everybody's the same. We had one chap, if we saw a fellow that was kind of not himself, we'd get him into the company of chatting, you know, talk about the final. The Ireland final was.
I remember you telling me a story once, Tom. Remember when there was an abortive effort to exchange of prisoners, and you decided that if there was going to be another exchange of prisoners that didn't work off, that you were going to overpower the guards on the return back to prison camp and escape in that fashion, and you were given a particular task to do.
Yes.
Can you just tell us about that task?
We were taken from Colwaysie now. We were transferred from Jadotville to Colwaysie, which is 80 miles further on.
Correct.
You know, to get further away the guys, less chance. Yeah. And if there's a Jewish airport, and the accommodation was low, it was for pilots and that we were. So then there was the good news. We were being exchanged because the UN took prisoners as well, you see. You know, obviously, when there's 2 fit.
Yes.
They brought us nearly 200 miles, it was, to 180 miles from Colwaysie to Elizabethville, to a disused airport where they'd bring their prisoners and we'd bring ours, and you'd have fellows, observers, making sure nothing happened. So we went in open trucks. No, this is buses at this stage. No, so
yes.
We went in open trucks. The first time we went in open trucks, the whole way 200 miles sitting out, no, you just sat there in the dust from the, you know, and they wouldn't pull up. You'd have to pee outside over the side, but they wouldn't pull up for us if we had to bowel movement. You know, and we were all a kind of diarrhea-ish, you know. We came back to that night. We were there all day on a runway, and their prisoners were, and we were here sitting in the tarmac. And next thing, it's off. No exchange. Into the trucks. There's a truck, it doesn't matter. We got into our vehicles and back for Colwaysie, 180 mile away. Now, Jadotville is 80 miles from Elizabethville.
That's right.
Quinlan, Quinlan, your father, he told us to lie down. We couldn't all fit in the hotel, and we were lying on the street, on the footpath. and he didn't want this. We couldn't. So remember, he saw one fellow sitting up. He's telling him to act exhausted. Will you lie down, will you? I can still hear him. And we used to call the Kerry accent and sit, lie down, and we used to have an old cry then in the camp. Will you lie down, will you? We stayed there overnight in the Hotel de l'Europe, where we were prisoners originally, and off for Colway. And settled in and all that. But the thing happened the first night when we went into Colway. That night, some of the guards abused some of our people. Beat them, in fact. And your father stood in.
Yeah.
He told him in no uncertain manner. You know what I mean? And he was always remembered for that, which is he wasn't having any of this. And we settled down in Colway then. Yeah. There's a lovely big bit on a big open space. But when they were searching us in Elizabethville for arms and ammunition, one or two fellows have caught a few rounds that they got a bit of a punch in them. But then they came to the kit bags. We were allowed to keep our hurls, you see, mounts. And they saying we were rushing, they were rooting through the kit, and then they pull out this, come on, you see. Now they didn't know what it was. And they all got around us, and fellows were poking that with it. And one fellow got a brainwave. He did this. There were oars.
Yes.
There were oars. And then, where are the boats, you see? If you have oars, you must have.
Yeah.
They were behind buildings to find that's the funny one, and it's right.
Well, it's good, Tom. It's good to have these funny remembrances. But can we get to the stage now where memories? I know, but look, thinking of the time factor that we have, all that you were through captivity, you were released. Then you had nearly 2 more months before coming home. You were involved in other things, but eventually in December '61, you all came home to Ireland, and I know that nice things were said in your village in Tipperary and in newspapers about the homecoming and so on. But then there was a downside to the homecoming. Tell us about the downside of the homecoming and how that member that we're talking now about moral injury.
It was December and it was freezing, of course. So we got our pay and they gave us £200 or something, 20%. And I went in for a pint, you know the way. A pint again was on the member's up, and there's one of the bar stool heroes up in the corner, you see. And I overheard him saying, I didn't know you served cows here. And I looked at the barman and I looked at the pint. He didn't, and I walked out. Now, those other seasons, it's not all the Irish now here. There was a doctor there and he got us all together just around Christmas and brought us into a restaurant and bought us all a dinner. Dr. Winkworth, he was a president. There's all the type of fellow at the bar are always the minorities. You cannot judge everybody. You'd get the old white flag and fellas, you know.
Tom, if I can go back a little bit, just from your personal point of view, how did you feel when you were in the battle? As in, I use those words as in, you know, for you to come on the fire like that, were you scared? Did you just jump into action? How did you feel? If you don't mind me asking that.
The first attack in that it was where are they? Which, you know, and I was I was in the rain and my number 2 in the trench. And there was pandemonium and didn't want to stop firing like the American fire, but trying to conserve your ammo as we were. And it went on for about an hour and a half. And they retreated. Well, they didn't molest it. They gave up. And there was silence then until the next morning. And around 11 again, they started more in earnest. But we had all the terrain more reconnoitred. And there was a slope over to my right, there was a slope down to it, And some fellow said now, which was a good idea, in fact, we wasn't to fire at the fellas coming down nearer to us. We used to fire at the fellas on the ridge up with the machine guns. And the fellas in the front didn't know they were under fire, you see. There was nobody falling around them. So when they'd come down into range, then we'd take care of them. That's if you had to slope downwards to your trench. That was one little 11 thing, you see. And nighttime was the terrible time. You're sitting there, you can't see the star, not staring at it. Your nerves are like piano strings. Everything that moved was exaggerated. And we're always good at. It's a great thing that we could have a laugh, you see. Or we'd make a joke out of serious. Not serious. At night time was the worst. You're not afraid when you're firing when you're under attack.
Mm-hmm.
You're not really. You're more into, will this machine gun keep firing? Do you get me? How was my number two? How was he? Things, and you're not afraid then because you're too preoccupied with what you have to do. You forget about fear.
Yep.
Nighttime is when you're afraid. Everything is exaggerated. And then you start thinking of home and the usual. Normally it was a rated size of funny. They had skinless sausages, you see. Only skinless sausages. And we got nicknames. I called him Skinless. Skinless, where's my ammunition? And he called me anti-tank. Anti-tank gun, you see. And that was a laugh, a little way. Why I say skinless, you miserable sounds.
Yeah. You've got, can I just say, and I'm going to pass back over to Leah, but where did you get your sense of humor from after coming through all of that? Because you have I can just tell, a fantastic, and I think that's what I suppose, like you're alluding to there, is to be able to have that laugh, yet you were in a very death or life situation, basically.
We are the Irish, you see, fighting for every cause except our own.
Yeah.
It's great. The Italians are all whinging and crying, Swedes are all the time cribbing about the condition. We got to get on with it.
That's a feature of the Irish everywhere, not just in the military. All around the world, they can fit in better, and the sense of humor gets them through a lot of things. But Tom, look, let's get to, you're at home in Mullingar. You've had some people saying they don't serve cars in here and so on and so forth. How has all this affected you for let's say the last 60 years? You're home now 64 years home. I mean, with all these memories and everything, has it affected still? Can you tell us about it?
I was never promoted. A lot of the Jadotville people were never promoted. I had to go from to four.
Why is that?
Because certain officers, I met my commanding officer one day on the square. I was playing football for West. I was good at things. At least. You, yes, sir, good footballer. Bad soldier, he said. I walked away and I was never promoted. I had to change course to get promoted.
We won't mention any names, Tom, but for the record, for listeners, that officer that said bad soldier, he was not in a company in the Congo, but he was out in the Congo at the same time. So that's enough said on that. So that would have been very, very hurtful for you to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay. And anyway, as time went on, how did you manage?
became a trainee psychiatric nurse, which was a good job at the time. And I went there, and it got to me. I left. It was too drab, and there was no camaraderie, and I left. I went back to the army, and I was in Cyprus 2 weeks later. It was the Cyprus on the road. And it was myself then, you see, with my comrades and Bishop, none of this cowardly stuff and all that. And a good time in Cyprus. Never heard a shot, in fact.
Yeah.
It was the opposite of the other thing. And I came back from Cyprus. I was in the artillery. I applied for a course. I don't know what this affected. It was the Ordnance Survey course.
Mm-hmm.
I nearly had my leaving done. I said, so I passed the exam, you see. And the night before I was to go to Baldonan for it, I was told, no, you're not going. Somebody else has got it. I back in then shooting, or I was fairly good at most things. No promotion. Then after years, I transferred to the medical corps, and they promoted me nearly immediately to corporal. And then I got a good job. I had my pension, you see. And it's a security in a big fountain. With my pension, I could look after them. I'd have doubled the money, but it hurt me to leave the army.
I was going to, Tom, I was going to ask you that. Like, I know what you went to in Jadotville and that. Do you have any regrets that you joined the army? Because you just alluded there at leaving the army, even though you went to Jadotville and in Cyprus. Are you glad you did join the army, or do you have regrets?
Looking back at it, I say they sent me off to be a Christian brother. This is 2 years up in Dublin, in Baldoyle, you know, it was worse than. And I left one night and went to Clonmel. I was only 15 and a half, and I joined the army. I was tall, I could stop a bullet. You know, that time you were in.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a terrible place at that stage. There was the difference between, and the fellas I met, I don't know, I wouldn't talk to most of them because they were, you know, they were rough, and I thought they were that, but I blended in anyway. And I got best shot when passing out. And then I went to Galway to learn Irish. I liked the accent. And off I went to Galway on a train to Limerick with the unconsumed portions of my rations in a sandbag. You don't know. When you left the barracks that time, if you left before dinner, if you left after dinner, you're all right. But if you left before dinner, you'd have to bring your dinner with you, the unconsumed portion. And you're in the barracks. The first thing they said has been, where's the unconsumed portion of your rations? And they're in a sandbag.
Those were the days. Those were the days.
Sorry, okay. I laughed at that. But that was the regiment, the regimental thing. And he brought me down, that's your bed, sleep in it if you're and all this. And it was raw, you know. And I was only 15 and a half. And these Galway people were great.
We have said over the years that there was very little duty of care for returning veterans. And this is not just in the Irish Army. We know from it's in the police force, it's in prison services, it's in public sector, and it's in armies all over the world, the same thing. But we've kind of identified in Ireland that there's very little duty of care, or has been very little duty of care to Jadotville veterans and their families when they came home with the problems, etc., etc. So I'm just curious about how you feel like that, and how are you coping yourself with the fact that you haven't got the medal that you were recommended for, and that you didn't even know you were recommended for many, many years? Would you like to expand a little bit on that?
Not getting a medal. We're soldiers. You get a medal or you don't. You leave that to the light of yourself to decide on the action. There was five suicides two little people who were given military medal for that, they didn't get it. We didn't get the medal, and that's the end of that. We got the Jadotville medal, which is unique for 155 as a habit. It's a medal. It's unique, and we just got on with it. You'd have whingers, of course. So ours not the reason why, ours not to make reply, ours but to do and die. Tennyson, Charge of the Light Brigade. That's it. Get over it. Fellas, me first we didn't get a medal. When I didn't get it. The soldiery or not.
Yeah.
We can go a trinket, we would call it. And get on with it.
How are you now? Jadotville thing. How are you feeling about it? Are you disappointed? Are you angry? Are you accepting it, or what?
I have blanked it out. I was in a pub there about a year ago, and after some sermon, I had my medals on, you see, and another wag like that. And he goes, "Oh, you're one of the fellas that threw in the towel at Jadotville." I had two variables, and I had a number, and I did this, and the barman barred me. And this little runt.
Yeah.
Things like that. But you get over it, but it's hard enough. There's so many good people around that shook your hand and go on parades and go on things.
That's right. Well, that's good to know.
They checked, and they were the real. They made you feel taller. I'd go to big ceremonies in men and that, and their photographs taken. I thought it was John Wayne, as one says, or so many photographs.
And Tom, how did your kids and your wife feel? Like, what do you think it had an effect on them?
I don't know. I lost two sons. One committed suicide. I don't know, and he joined the army, in fact, and he didn't get on in it. And he hung himself after, and other son died from. And it was, you felt. You see, if you're a footballer and you score goals, everybody is always a great fellow. But you walk down the town and as if you weren't there, You nearly take to a pint and they had a Siege of Jadotville, you know about them. You got that feeling, and all the men that died in the gutter, and no one to hand out to them. Come on over here, something that.
I'm very sorry to hear that, Tom. That's
that's the way life is, you see. When the going gets tough, the tough gets going.
It's going, but you're a very tough man. So I'm going to ask you. I'm going to get Leo to go through the question. I'm going to ask you to finish off then with a little advice for people listening to this show, not just in Ireland, in Australia, New Zealand, and all over the world. So, Leo, can I pass it back to you, please?
But look, I know you pretty well, I think, over the last 10 years, and Sheila and we've counted ourselves blessed that we have become friends with you and Teresa, because we admire you greatly. I think that we've also, as it affected me, I can survive, of course, and it's affected me, but I'd be a liar to say if I didn't have some anger in me or some disappointment in me of the way Jadotville people were treated. But you're a survivor, Tom. I just want to say thank you very, very much for coming on with Marty and I today, telling us about your experiences. And as Marty said, I could listen to you for hours and hours. You've got so much you could tell us, Just finally, I'd just like to say thank you very, very much. And please stay healthy and say hello to Teresa from Marty and I, okay? Thank you, Tom.
Okay, Tom, if you could finish off for us, and if you could just give a little advice. I love your sense of humor, by the way. I got to chat you more. I love that, as you said about your comrades, to be able to do that. And I don't know how your wife put up with you, but anyway, that's a whole other story. But can you give some advice for the Jadotville families and the comrades that are still alive, how you cope with it, and we'll finish off on that, please.
Yeah, for the people that are alive, there isn't many of us, but we communicate a bit, and we feel, when you consider other armies, the way they're treated when they come home, that we, probably the best soldier material in the world, are the Irish.
Mm.
And we fought in all fronts and for all things. So to be kind of looked upon as a kind of an outcast. So, but we got on with it family-wise, and it was rough enough. I lost my house at one stage. But it still hurts.
Mm.
But like I said, you're not going to go around crying on everybody's shoulder. Just get on with life in general. The world is in a state of chassis, as Sean O'Casey said, meaning chaos. And you have lunatics going around shouting and roaring, and genocide, rampant genocide. I saw things in the Congress make a blood run cold after massacres, and it's going on our doorstep.
Well, all I can say is, Tom, it's a pleasure to have you on, and it's an honor. And thank you so much. Leo, thank you. See you guys. See you, Tom.
See you, Leo.
Okay.
Good night. And listen
luck,
to our
Tom.
episodes on the next episode, and go to Moral Injury International for all our stories and all the podcasts, audio and video. And you can then click to our old social media and YouTube. So for tonight, good night, and see you on the next episode.
The unsung heroes of Jadotville. Why do veterans sigh? Veterans do not cry. Our eyes are dim, bereft of smile. We're thinking of the days when our eyes were bright, our aim was true. We did not flinch or frown. Our kin had brought an empire down. The foe charged darkly, densely on. Each time we drove them back, and from the air they bound us there, beneath the blazing and African sun. Then at last, our water gone and our ammo spent, to a prisoner of war camp we were sent to wait our fate. For weeks and months we languished there, no mother's smile or wife's embrace, no morning mists or valleys green, no early chorus, not even a robin was seen. And this was a terrible place. Then at last we were homeward bound. The station lights came into view, no sound of piper or bugle filled the air. No mayors, no generals the platform graced, no welcome home for the disgraced. The veterans mused to themselves, what had they done wrong? They fought for the noble cause of peace. We did not let our corps or country down, or should we have obeyed the old lie and die? Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. It is sweet and proper to die for your country. Captain Wilfred Owen, killed in action the 3rd of the 11th, 1918 at Mons, almost made it. May he rest in peace. The generals were our comrades too, sometimes they wondered. They left the gallant band fade in ignominy and shame. They did not reckon with our steely Irish grace and Kerry will, for Commandant Pat Quinlan led and fought at Jadotville.